My shop was quietest just before noon, when the office workers in Seochon had not yet escaped for lunch, and the tourists still believed the palace walls were more interesting than the narrow alley where I repaired torn hanji, rebound old notebooks, and sold inkstones to people who liked the idea of patience more than the practice of it. My name is Park Si-yoon. I was 29 years old, an Omega, and I had built my life from paper, debt, and the kind of stubbornness that looks gentle only from a distance. The sign outside my workshop said, "Cloud Paper Studio," in letters my father had brushed before his hands began to shake. The name made the place sound soft. In truth, paper restoration is mostly arguing with time using wheat paste, tweezers, humidity, and prayer. I spent my mornings coaxing torn family registers back into shape, my afternoons teaching calligraphy to office workers who apologized to their brushes, and my evenings doing sums in a notebook I hid under the counter because numbers are more frightening when they are given their own drawer. I liked my life. That matters because people later tried to describe me as rescued, as if I had been waiting in some corner of Seoul for a rich alpha to discover me. I was not waiting. I was working. I had a leaking ceiling above the drying rack, a landlord who smiled too often while mentioning redevelopment, a mother in Daejeon whose blood pressure behaved like a protest movement, and a younger sister, Park Ha-rin, who was in her final year of nursing school and pretended the cafeteria was delicious because she knew I checked her bank transfers. I had one best friend, Lee Jun-ho, who owned half of a tiny dumpling shop with his cousin and the entirety of a bad relationship with an alpha chef named Yoo Min-gyu, a man so inconsistent he should have been issued with a weather warning. I had a small circle of customers who trusted me with the paper remains of their families. I had Professor Moon, an elderly white cat from the neighboring antique shop who slept on my scrap basket and judged everyone, including Buddhist monks, with equal severity. I had dignity, which is not a roof, not medicine, not tuition, but is still something a person may stand under in bad weather. What I did not have was enough money to keep all those things from becoming vulnerable at once. My father's illness had left behind bills we had paid by shaving our lives thinner each year. My mother needed treatment she kept postponing because she said her knees were only old, as if age were a doctor. Hiren's school fees had been reduced but not removed. And my uncle, my mother's younger brother, had borrowed in our family name from men who introduced themselves politely and knew the exact hours I closed the shop. I had learned that danger in Seoul often wore clean sneakers and spoke in a voice low enough not to disturb customers. The first time one of them came, he bought a cheap brush, complimented my father's sign, and placed a folded paper on the counter with the total written in blue ink. The second time, he knew Harin's campus. The third time, he asked whether my mother still used the clinic near Daejeon Station. I did not panic. Panic wastes breath. I negotiated, delayed, sold 2 pieces of antique furniture my father had loved, and took private restoration work from people who wanted documents cleaned without questions. I told no one except Jun-ho, who responded by bringing dumplings, crying, threatening to poison several men with chive filling, and offering money he absolutely did not have. That was the state of my life when the invitation arrived. It was cream paper, thick enough to insult my inventory, with gold foil along the edge and a seal from Hwanseong Cultural Foundation. The annual Patrons Gala was one of those events where old families drank champagne beside modern art and congratulated themselves for preserving heritage while demolishing the neighborhoods where heritage still lived. I had not been invited because I belonged there. I had been invited because of Han Yura. Yura had known me at university, where I studied paper conservation on scholarship, and she studied art history with the relaxed posture of someone whose family owned buildings. She was beautiful, witty, and cruel in the efficient way of people who believe cruelty is only honesty performed attractively. In school, she and her friends had called me the Shrine Mouse because I worked part-time cataloging temple manuscripts and wore the same cardigan 3 winters in a row. 10 years later, she had become a foundation director with a pearl necklace, a public interest in traditional crafts, and apparently enough memory to send me an invitation. The note inside said, "We would love to see what became of you, Si-yoon. Bring your best manners." I read it twice. Professor Moon yawned on the counter. Junho read it once and tried to tear it in half. I saved it because the paper was excellent. "Do not go," he said. "She invited you as decoration." "Worse, as contrast." "Then absolutely do not go. There may be patrons. There may be wolves. Wolves occasionally commission restoration. They also eat people with nice handwriting." I smoothed the invitation. Hwansong Foundation funds small heritage grants. If I can speak to someone serious, I might get the ceiling repaired before the next rain season. Junho folded his arms. Flour dust streaked his black t-shirt. He had come straight from the shop after a morning of dumpling disasters and romantic avoidance. "You are doing that thing where you turn humiliation into strategy. It is a useful skill. It is a survival skill. Those are not always the same as good ideas." I looked at him then, properly. His eyes were tired. Mingyu had again missed a supplier meeting and again sent flowers instead of an explanation, which Junho had placed in a bucket outside the dumpling shop, because even heartbreak should not ruin dining ambiance. We were both experts in accepting too little from situations that cost too much. "I will go for 1 hour," I said. "I will wear my best suit. I will speak to grant people. If anyone calls me a shrine mouse, I will leave after stealing canapes." "You do not steal." "I will morally redistribute," he sighed. "Text me every 20 minutes. You are not my mother. Your mother would come with a rolling pin." "True. I went because need makes a person practical, and because part of me, smaller and less dignified than I prefer to admit, wanted to stand under those chandeliers and show Han Yu-ra I had not dissolved after her laughter. I wore a black suit I had altered myself, a white shirt with cuffs my father had once embroidered in pale gray thread, and a simple silver ring that meant nothing except that my hands looked less bare when I was nervous. I took the subway to Itaewon because taxis were expensive, and because arriving by subway to a hotel with a private security entrance gave me secret satisfaction. The ballroom glittered with money trying to look cultured. Ink paintings hung between floral installations. Men in tailored suits discussed preservation over imported wine. Omegas in silk stood beside alphas who touched their waists as if claiming space on a map. I felt the old university sensation return. Not shame exactly, but awareness of being read incorrectly by people who believed wealth was a language, and I had an accent. Han Yu-ra found me near a display of Goryeo paper fragments. "Si-yoon," she said, drawing my name out softly. "You came. You invited me." "I did. How brave of you." She kissed the air near my cheek. Her perfume was white flowers and calculation. "Still working with paper?" "Still." "How precious." I always admired people who could remain small without resentment. The insult was wrapped carefully enough that anyone nearby might mistake it for charm. I smiled. And I always admired people who could make emptiness sound busy. Her eyes sharpened. A man beside her laughed too late, unsure which side was safer. She recovered quickly. "Come, some of our old classmates are here. Everyone will be fascinated." Fascinated meant entertained. I let her lead me because sometimes walking into a room of knives is safer than turning your back. The group near the champagne table included 3 people from university and 2 I did not know. They greeted me with surprise polished into manners. Someone asked whether I still lived above a shop. Someone else said traditional craft must be so soothing, as if rent were a meditation exercise. I answered politely. I made them laugh twice in ways that left small cuts. Then Han Yura lifted her glass and said, "We should introduce Si-yoon to Kwon Tae. He collects unusual things." A small hush moved through the group. I knew the name. Everyone did. Kwon Tae was the eldest grandson of Kwon Il-seok, founder of the Daemyeong Group, which owned shipping companies, luxury hotels, construction firms, security agencies, and several charities so clean on paper they shone. Beneath that polished surface, according to whispers, no journalist printed without 3 lawyers, ran the old Bukhansan Syndicate, a network built from ports, loans, protection contracts, and men who vanished from public arguments. Kwon Tae was 35, an alpha, heir apparent, recently returned from Busan after a struggle with his uncle over succession. The press called him private. Business pages called him disciplined. Junho, who followed gossip with the devotion of a scholar, called him a funeral wearing cufflinks. I saw him across the ballroom before anyone pointed. He stood near a low stage with 2 older men and a woman in a navy suit, tall and still in a black tuxedo, so restrained it seemed almost severe. His hair was dark, his expression calm, his gaze lowered slightly as he listened. Around him, powerful people behaved like students around a strict teacher. Cold alpha, I thought. Controlled. Not cruel in any obvious way, but dangerous through discipline. Han Yura touched my elbow lightly. "Tae Junsi," she called as we approached, sweet enough to rot teeth. "Forgive me. I wanted to introduce an old friend from university. Park Si-yoon. He restores paper. Isn't that charming?" The implication stood in the space between us. Look what I brought. A humble little omega from the past, a joke dressed as culture. Kwon Tae turned. His gaze met mine, and something very small shifted in his face. Not recognition exactly, attention. His eyes were dark, steady, and unhurried. He did not look at me the way some alphas look at omegas, sliding over softness or measuring obedience. He looked as if I had spoken before I opened my mouth. His scent was muted by blockers, but a trace reached me beneath the hotel's roses and champagne. Cedar, cold stone after rain, and roasted barley tea left to cool. "Park Si-yoon-si," he said. His voice was low and level. "I know your work." That startled me more than any insult could have. "Do you? You repaired a Joseon family register for the Seongmun archive last year. The rebacking was restrained. Most people overcorrect damage when they fear being judged." I stared at him. Han Yura's smile became confused at the edges. "That was a private commission. The archive director showed me before the donor dinner. He spoke highly of you. He complained about my invoice. He also paid it. Eventually." The corner of Taejun's mouth moved, a hint so brief I nearly mistrusted my own eyes. Yura laughed brightly. "How unexpected. Si-yoon always was diligent. We used to call him our little shrine mouse." There it was, placed before him like a dessert. I felt heat climb my neck, not from shame but from the old irritation of being returned to a smaller version of myself by people who had not earned the right. Before I could answer, Taejun set his untouched glass on a passing tray. "Do not call my future husband that," he said. The ballroom did not go silent all at once. Silence travels in wealthy rooms like a spill, beginning near the source and spreading as people notice expensive fabric is at risk. Han Yura's mouth parted. The classmates stared. I, who had repaired war-damaged manuscripts with steadier hands than priests, forgot entirely how to breathe in a normal rhythm. "Your what?" Yura said, and for once no pearl necklace could rescue her tone. Taejun stepped beside me, not touching, near enough that his presence altered the social weather. "My future husband," he repeated. Park Si-yoon and I have been discussing marriage privately. I assumed your invitation was courtesy, not entertainment. Go, discussing marriage privately. My mind, usually useful in emergencies, presented no helpful files. I could either deny him and become the joke again, or accept the shield of a dangerous stranger and owe a debt I did not understand. I chose the third option, which was to smile as if everyone else had arrived late to a fact. We had intended to be discreet, I said, but discretion rarely survives champagne. Taejun's gaze flicked to me. There, for half a second, was something like approval. Han Yura swallowed. Someone behind her whispered. The woman in the navy suit, who I later learned was attorney Jang Min-seo, appeared at Taejun's shoulder with the swift calm of a person trained to manage explosions. Chairman Kwon will be pleased to hear the matter is settled, she said. Matter settled. Those words carried machinery. Taejun offered me his arm. May I? He asked softly enough that only I heard. It was absurd to ask permission after announcing me as his future husband to half the room. It was also the first thing that made me trust he understood the absurdity. I placed my fingers on his sleeve. For the performance, I murmured. For the exit, he replied. He led me away from Han Yura, away from the classmates who had invited me as a joke, and now watched as if the joke had stood up and inherited a company. We crossed the ballroom slowly. People bowed, people stared. Someone congratulated us. Taejun answered with a nod so precise it discouraged follow-up questions. Near the balcony doors, he stopped beside a marble column and faced me. I apologize, he said. That was not planned. I gathered, unless your courtship style is usually public ambush. No. Good. It lacks tenderness. Again, that tiny, almost smile, gone before it could be held accountable. Yura meant to humiliate you. She has been practicing for years. I disliked it. Most people do not announce marriage as a corrective measure. Most people are not being watched by 3 factions waiting to decide whether I will comply with a marriage alliance. The machinery behind the words clicked into place. I looked around. Men who had not cared about me 10 minutes ago were watching from various distances. So I am now useful. His face did not soften, but his answer came quickly. You are now at risk because of my statement. That is my responsibility. I appreciated the honesty enough to distrust it carefully. What kind of risk? Political, possibly financial. If anyone believes you are leverage, they may approach you. Approach is a polite word. Yes. I looked down at my hand still resting on his sleeve. The fabric was excellent. Of course it was. And what do you propose, Kwon Tae? A conversation. Somewhere private, with your own lawyer present if you want one. About the future husband claim. About making it true enough to protect you and useful enough to protect me. I laughed once, quietly. That may be the least romantic sentence ever spoken beside a balcony. Romance would be dishonest. So would pretending I am not considering it because my life is currently flammable. His gaze sharpened. Are you in debt? That is not balcony information. No, it is contract information. I should have walked away. Pride told me to. Dignity, however, is not the same as pride. Dignity asks whether you can still look at yourself after choosing survival. Pride asks whether anyone saw you bend. I texted Jun-ho from the restroom. Do not panic. I may be engaged to a Mafia heir. He called immediately. I declined. He sent 17 messages, the last of which read, I am coming with dumplings and a weapon. I replied, bring the dumplings. The meeting happened the next morning in a private office above a gallery in Cheongdam, because apparently powerful criminal families negotiated marriage near abstract sculpture. I arrived with Joon-ho and a lawyer his cousin knew from tenant rights cases, attorney Kim Hye-jin, who wore scuffed loafers and looked at Kwon Tae-jun's polished conference table as if it owed her money. Tae-jun sat across from us with attorney Jang. In daylight, he looked no warmer, only more clearly made of restraint. "Before we begin," Joon-ho said, pointing a paper bag at him, "if you threaten Si-yun, I will leak sauce on your documents." Attorney Jang blinked. Tae-jun looked at the bag. "What kind of sauce?" "Soy vinegar." "Then I will avoid threats." I closed my eyes. Joon-ho. "I'm establishing dominance. You brought dumplings to a legal meeting." "Exactly." Tae-jun turned to me. "Your friend is loyal. He is also underslept and emotionally combustible." "I can be both," Joon-ho said. Attorney Kim opened her notebook. "Let's discuss why my client was publicly declared your future husband without consent." "Because I acted to stop a public humiliation and to solve a succession problem in the same breath," Tae-jun said. "The first reason was impulsive. The second was opportunistic. Both created consequences. I am prepared to compensate and protect him, whether he accepts further arrangement or not." Attorney Kim's pen paused. That was unusually direct. "I dislike wasting time. Many men who dislike wasting time also dislike being corrected. I dislike that too. I accept it when necessary." I looked at him then, annoyed by how difficult he was making it to dismiss him. The proposal was presented plainly. Tae-jun's grandfather had set a condition before transferring final authority. Tae-jun must be legally married to a socially credible spouse within 3 months, not as romance, but as proof of stability, and to block an alliance his uncle, Kwon Sang-moo, was pushing through Han Yu-ra's family. Yu-ra's introduction had been part insult, part trap. If Tae-jun appeared unattached, her family would announce intentions. By naming me, he had broken their timing. If I agreed to a 12-month marriage contract, he would clear my uncle's debt from every ledger connected to our family, purchase my workshop building through a neutral foundation and transfer it to me after 6 months, fund my mother's treatment through a medical grant, pay Harin's remaining tuition anonymously, provide security, and compensate me monthly for public obligations. We would live together at his Hanam residence for appearances and safety. We would attend family events. No sexual obligation, no bonding, no reproductive clause, separate rooms, private locks. My work continued, my family protected from knowledge unless I chose to tell them. Professor Moon explicitly allowed to remain at the workshop doorway because Joon-ho insisted morale clauses were important. Attorney Kim read each page with increasing suspicion because fair documents from unfair circumstances make good lawyers itch. I marked clauses too. "This says public affection by mutual discretion," I said. "Define affection." Attorney Jang answered, "Hand at back, linked arms, staged photographs, possibly cheek contact depending on event. No cheek contact without separate consent." Added, "No entering my room without permission." "Already included," Tae-jun said. "Then bold it." Attorney Jang actually did. "My friend can visit without being searched like a smuggler." "1 clearance," Tae-jun said. "After that, no routine search." Joon-ho narrowed his eyes. "What about dumplings?" "Allowed." "Sauce?" "Case by case." I pressed my fingers to my temple. "My mother cannot know the debt was cleared by you." "How should it be explained?" Tae-jun asked. "A foundation grant. She will accept institutional mercy before personal rescue." "Done." "And if I refuse?" He looked at me, not the lawyer, not Joon-ho. "I will still ensure the men connected to your uncle's debt do not approach your family again. I caused your visibility. I will reduce the risk. Without marriage, Yes. That answer changed the room more than anything else. Jun-ho stopped rustling the paper bag. Attorney Kim looked at me. A trap offers only one door. Tae-jun had opened another, which meant accepting his offer would be choice under pressure, not choice erased. The distinction mattered. It did not cleanse the situation, but it gave me ground under my feet. "Why me?" I asked. "Because you were insulted in front of me and did not ask to be saved," he said. "Because your work shows patience. Because you corrected me with humor when most people either flatter or fear. Because you need what I can provide, and I need someone who will not become decorative simply because the room expects it." Jun-ho muttered, "That was almost nice. Suspicious." Tae-jun did not look away from me. And because when I said future husband, I did not dislike the sound. Attorney Jang became very interested in her tablet. My face warmed, which irritated me. "That sentence is not legally relevant." "No," Tae-jun said. "It is not." I signed 3 days later. Not because he had charmed me. He had not. Kwon Tae had the warmth of a locked archive in February. I signed because my mother could finally receive treatment without pretending pain was weather, because Harin could finish nursing school without counting convenience store meals, because my workshop could remain a workshop instead of becoming a dessert cafe with a neon moon, because the men who knew my family's addresses would be stopped by someone more frightening than they were, and because I had read every clause. The legal marriage happened quietly first, at a district office with fluorescent lights and a clerk who processed us between a couple arguing about witness signatures and a man renewing a family registry. Tae-jun wore black. I wore the same suit from the gala, now carrying a different kind of absurdity. Jun-ho stood as my witness, glaring at everyone. Attorney Jang stood for Tae-jun. When the clerk asked whether we wanted a photo, Tae-jun looked at me. "For records," he said. "Everything with you is for records." "Not everything." So, I shouldn't have heard softness in that. Perhaps I invented it. The clerk held up the camera. Tae-jun stood beside me, close but not touching. Then, very quietly, he asked, "May I place my hand at your back?" "For records?" "For credibility." "How practical." "Yes." I nodded. His hand settled lightly at my back. Warmth moved through the thin layer of my suit, not dramatic, simply present. My omega body, which had survived years by refusing to be impressed by alpha proximity, took note against my instructions. The camera clicked. We looked like strangers behaving well. The public announcement came a week later at a foundation luncheon, where Tae-jun introduced me not as future husband this time, but as my husband, Park Si-yoon, with the calm of a man placing a blade on a table. Han Yura was there, her smile held, barely. I smiled back with all the kindness I could spare, which was very little. Moving into Tae-jun's house in Hanam was stranger than the marriage. Paperwork is abstract. Toothbrushes are not. His residence stood behind stone walls on a quiet street where even the trees seemed privately maintained. Inside, everything was elegant, expensive, and emotionally underpopulated. Pale walls, dark floors, art chosen by someone allergic to clutter, furniture so low and severe it looked designed for people who never dropped socks. A housekeeper named Mrs. Seo showed me my suite, the sitting room between my rooms and Tae-jun's, the kitchen, a small garden terrace, and a workroom he had prepared with a large table, humidity controls, archival storage drawers, and a lamp suitable for paper repair. I stood in that workroom longer than I meant to. "This was unnecessary," I said. Tae-jun stood at the threshold. He did that often, I would learn. Stopped at edges until invited. "You will need to work at home sometimes for security." "That explains a table, not Japanese tissue in 3 weights. I asked the Seongmun archive director what you use. He complained about my invoice. He also answered thoroughly. I touched one drawer handle. The metal was cool. The contract does not require you to understand my tools. No. Then why? He looked at the room, then back at me. Ignorance causes damage. That answer should not have reached me. It did. I put it aside carefully. The first month was a formal collision disguised as domestic routine. Tae-joon liked mornings silent. I liked asking philosophical questions before coffee because it punished the universe. He ate rice, soup, and grilled fish at dawn. I ate toast with yuja jam and told him fish before 8 was evidence of moral injury. He kept the thermostat at a temperature suitable for preserving manuscripts and emotionally distant alphas. I raised it 2 degrees. He lowered it 1. I raised it again and left a note that said, "Historical objects prefer stable warmth." He wrote below it, "Sources." I wrote, "Me." He let it stay. Security became our first true argument. His chief of security, Ma Dong-geun, a beta built like a wardrobe and kinder than his job description, wanted someone inside my workshop whenever I worked late. I refused. Customers do not want to confess family paper disasters while a large man watches them from the ink shelf, I said at breakfast. Tae-joon did not look up from his phone. They will adapt. No, they will leave. Then I will have a protected empty shop, which is a very expensive form of failure. Your safety matters more than customer comfort. My life includes work. Work includes customers. Therefore, customer comfort is part of safety. He set down the phone. That is an argument, not a fact. Most facts begin as arguments people survive long enough to prove. Mrs. Seo pouring tea made a small sound that might have been approval. Tae-joon looked at me for a long moment. Ma will stay in the antique shop next door. Professor Moon dislikes him. Ma will bring treats. Bribery compromises morale. It often improves it. The compromise held. Ma became friends with the antique shop owner. Professor Moon accepted treats without affection, and customers learned that the large man reading historical novels next door was none of their business. Tae-joon and I learned each other through such negotiations. He learned I washed my own mug because disappearing cups made me feel like a guest. The next day, a shelf appeared in the kitchen labeled Si-yeon's mug in Mrs. Seo's neat handwriting. I suspected him. He denied involvement. Mrs. Seo denied nothing. He learned I hated being called delicate, that I liked pears cut thin, that I forgot lunch when repairing badly water-damaged documents, and that I became polite in a particular way when angry enough to be dangerous. I learned he disliked sweet coffee, but ate the yagwa my mother sent after she met him because refusing food from older women violated some private code. I learned he read shipping reports at 2 in the morning, loosened his tie only when truly exhausted, and answered his grandfather's calls, standing as if old power could hear posture. I learned his coldness was not emptiness, it was containment. A dam is not empty, it is water under discipline. The slow things were the dangerous things, not diamonds, not dramatic rescues, not declarations. Barley tea appeared in the refrigerator after I mentioned my mother made it in summer. A small humidifier arrived in my bedroom because the house air dried my hands. The workroom gained a low stool exactly the right height for long repairs. The kitchen began stocking the cheap red bean buns Harin liked after one visit where she tried to act unimpressed by rich people and failed at the heated toilet seat. Tae-joon never announced these things. They appeared and he allowed practical explanation to cover them like a dust cloth. A healthy, contractual spouse performs better. A comfortable omega creates fewer problems. A sister who enjoys visiting strengthens appearances. I told myself this each time, because believing care too early is how people become furniture in someone else's house. My internal life became a ledger. Debt cleared. Not love. Mother treated. Not love. Security respectful, not love. Remembered pairs, not love. Asked before touching, not love. Looked at me across a crowded room as if checking whether I was tired rather than whether I was useful. Dangerous, still not love. I valued emotional truth above performance, which sounds admirable until truth begins misbehaving. The truth was that I noticed him. I noticed the way his voice lowered when speaking to frightened staff. I noticed he never interrupted Attorney Jang, even when older men tried to speak over her. I noticed he disliked his uncle not only politically, but morally, because Sang-moo enjoyed making people uncertain. I noticed Tae-jun's control sharpened around cruelty, not because he admired it, but because he expected it. At a family dinner in Pyeongchang-dong, his grandfather, Kwon Il-seok, studied me over black tea. The old chairman had silver hair, thin hands, and eyes with all the warmth of winter sunlight on glass. "So this is the Omega from the gala," he said, "the one they brought as a joke." The table quieted. Tae-jun's hand stilled beside his cup. I smiled. People often underestimate jokes. They survive longer than speeches. The chairman laughed once. "You are not ashamed." "Oh, I was. Then I got busy." Kwon Sang-moo leaned back, smiling with his mouth only. "Busy spending my nephew's money?" I placed my cup down carefully. "Busy repairing things men with money store badly." Tae-jun's cousin coughed. Chairman Kwon's eyes brightened with interest. Sang-moo's smile thinned. Tae-jun said nothing, but when dessert came, the pear slices were placed closer to me without anyone visibly moving them. I accused him in the car afterward. "You signaled the staff. You like pears." That is not a defense. It is an explanation. Explanations can be guilty. His reflection in the car window almost smiled. Noted. Junho's subplot, because life refuses to organize itself around one person's marriage contract, worsened in parallel. Min-gyu, the unreliable alpha chef, returned with apologies, expensive knives as gifts, and a promise to help Junho expand the dumpling shop if Junho would stop being stubborn and move into his apartment. "He says I confuse independence with loneliness," Junho told me one afternoon while folding mandu wrappers at my workshop counter. "Do you?" "Obviously, but that does not make his apartment a cure." "Good." "Good, that is all. I am trying not to deliver a lecture while you hold filling." He looked toward the window where Ma sat next door with Professor Moon on his shoe. "Do you confuse independence with loneliness?" I pressed a paper weight onto a drying repair. "Frequently." "And Tae-jun?" "He confuses control with safety." "That sounds compatible in the worst way." "Thank you for your optimism." Junho sighed. "Just promise me if you stay one day, it will be because you want him, not because his house has better plumbing." "His plumbing is excellent." "Si-yun." "I promise." The first real crack in the arrangement came from my uncle, as most family disasters do. He appeared at my workshop in early autumn, smelling of alcohol, shame, and borrowed cologne. I had not seen him since learning his debt had become mine. He stood near the entrance, thinner than before, eyes refusing to settle. "Si-yuna," he said. Ma straightened next door. I shook my head once through the window. "Not yet." "You shouldn't be here," I said. "I heard you married rich." "Congratulations travels faster than apologies." He flinched. I was desperate. "So was I." They said the debt is gone. "It is." "Then you can help me start over." There it was, need wearing the face of entitlement. I thought of my mother hiding his letters, of Harin pretending scholarship rice tasted fine, of men with clean sneakers asking about clinics. "No," I said. He blinked. "I am family." "Yes, that is why you got this conversation instead of Ma Dong-gyun. That alpha husband of yours made you arrogant." "No, He made certain men afraid enough that I can be honest without calculating how many addresses they know. My uncle's face twisted. You think you belong with them now. They will use you and throw you out. Omegas like us do not become family to men like Kwon Tae. The sentence struck because it carried old fear in a familiar bowl. Before I could answer, Tae-jun entered. I had not heard the car. He stood behind my uncle, expression calm enough to frighten the room. Park Si-yun belongs to himself, he said. Remember that before speaking again. My uncle turned pale. Kwon-nim, I only... No. Tae-jun's voice did not rise. You used his name, his family, and his labor as collateral for your failures. You will not use his marriage to extend them. My uncle left with shaking hands. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt anger, sharp and misdirected because anger often grabs the nearest handle. I was handling it, I said. Tae-jun looked at me. Yes. Then why step in? Because he needed to understand the boundary had force. My boundary had force. I know. Do you? Or do you think force only counts when it sounds like you? His face changed by a fraction. Ma wisely vanished from the window. Tae-jun took one breath. I made that mistake, he said. I am sorry. The apology arrived too quickly for my anger to use. I hated that. You cannot become the wall around every room I enter. No. Protection can turn into possession when it stops asking. Yes. I stared at him, still angry, now inconvenienced by his accuracy. You are supposed to argue. I considered it. And? You were right. The problem with a cold man learning humility is that it leaves very little surface to push against. I turned away to straighten brushes that did not need straightening. Thank you for what you said, I muttered. About belonging to myself? It is true. Truth can still be used dramatically. I will reduce drama. Unlikely. Your family has a chandelier budget. He almost smiled. I will try. The turn came weeks later, quiet as paper drying. Tae-jun had been away for 2 days dealing with an issue at the port, which everyone referred to as logistics in the tone people use for blood. He texted times, not details. I told myself I did not wait for messages. I simply noticed when they arrived. On the second night, rain fell hard over Seoul, and I stayed late at the workshop repairing a bundle of letters from the 1950s. The ink faded, the paper brittle from damp. Around midnight, Tae-jun appeared in the doorway. His coat was wet, his face pale with fatigue, and there was a shallow cut along his jaw. You are bleeding, I said. Minor. That word is banned. He stepped inside but stopped on the mat, dripping onto the floor like an expensive storm. I did not want to return home before seeing you. There was no performance in it. No one watched. Ma was outside. Professor Moon slept in a basket. The sentence landed without armor. Why? I asked. His gaze moved to the letters on my table. Because rooms are easier to enter when you are in them. Small truths can be more devastating than confessions. This one entered me with no place to go. I fetched the first aid kit. He sat because I pointed. I cleaned the cut under the yellow work lamp, close enough to feel the cold rain trapped in his hair, close enough that his muted scent reached me. Cedar, stone, barley tea, and beneath it, something raw from exhaustion. What happened? I asked. My uncle tried to move men through a route my father closed years ago. That sounds like details that can harm me legally. The size, then, he is becoming impatient. He may try to make you look unsuitable. I was invited as a joke. Unsuitable is not new. Do not make his cruelty smaller. I paused with gauze in hand. Do not make my endurance smaller. His eyes lifted. For a moment, neither of us looked away. I will not, he said. That was when I saw it. The effort underneath his control, not to dominate the room, but to avoid doing harm with the only tools he had been taught. He was not cold because he had no feeling. He was cold because feeling in his family had always been evidence for prosecution. He had learned to survive by becoming difficult to read, and now he was trying to love. No, not love, I told myself. Not yet, trying to care without turning care into command. I taped the gauze to his jaw. "You came here instead of home," I said. "Yes." "That is inconvenient." "Yes." "And wet," I noticed. "You should have brought food." His mouth curved then, tired and real. "Ma has porridge in the car." I laughed despite myself. "Of course he does." The confrontation came sooner than either of us planned because Han Yura returned with better knives. At a foundation board dinner, she presented an old university photo of me in a faded cardigan beside a temple archive, laughing with classmates who had mocked me after. She told the table, "It is inspiring, really, how far Si-yoon has risen. Some people are made new by marriage." The room turned toward me. Before Tae-jun could speak, I set down my spoon. "Paper is not made new when restored," I said. "Only stabilized enough that careless hands cannot finish destroying it." Yura's smile tightened. Kwon Sang-moo chuckled. "Still, you must admit my nephew improved your circumstances." "He did." I looked at Tae-jun then, because truth mattered more than performance. "And I improved his." Silence sharpened. Sang-moo leaned forward. "In what way?" "He now has someone at the table willing to say when the room smells of rot." Chairman Kwon made a sound suspiciously close to amusement. Yura flushed. Tae-jun's face remained controlled, but under the table his hand opened near mine, palm up, not taking. Offering. I did not place my hand in it. Not there, not as proof for them. But I let my little finger touch his for half a second, enough for him to know I saw. Later in the car, he said, "You defended me." I defended accuracy. "Of course. Do not look pleased." "I am trying not to." "Try harder." He looked out the window, and in the reflection I saw the smile he failed to hide. The honesty arrived in the sitting room 3 nights later. It was late. The house was quiet. I was sorting receipts in the bowl I had forced into existence near the entrance, proof that questionable purchases had entered Tae-jun's museum of a house. He stood by the window, jacket off, sleeves rolled, looking less like an heir and more like a man who had misplaced sleep years ago. "The contract can be revised," he said. I looked up. That is a terrible opening for an emotional conversation. "Yes." "Continue, since we are already suffering." He turned. "Your workshop transfer will be completed next week, not at 6 months. Your mother's treatment fund is irrevocable. Harin's tuition is fully paid through graduation. Your family's debt is cleared beyond recovery. If you choose to leave, there will be no penalty. Security remains until you dismiss it. Attorney Kim can review everything." My throat tightened before I could stop it. "Why now?" "Because if I ask you to stay while your life depends on remaining, it is not asking." There it was, the clean wound of respect. I stood slowly. "And are you asking?" His face changed. "Not much. Enough." "I want to." "Then do it." "I do not know how without making it sound like a command." "Try." He looked at me across the room we had altered together with mugs, receipts, a low cushion, and a cat hair on his black trousers he had not noticed. "Stay," he said, then closed his eyes briefly. "No. Please consider staying. Not as payment, not as protection, not because I said future husband and built a contract around the damage. Stay if this house has become somewhere you can breathe. Stay if I have become someone you choose when no one is watching." My eyes stung. I hated that. "You are late," I said. "Yes." I spent months telling myself every kind thing you did was logistics. I know. I told myself your attention was strategy. Some of it began that way. That is not comforting. No, but it is true. I crossed my arms because if I did not hold myself together, the room might see too much. When did it stop being strategy? He did not answer quickly. Tae-joon never wasted words when honesty required weight. The night you wrote sources, under my thermostat note, he said. I kept the paper. I stared. That was in the first month. Yes. You kept my heating complaint? It was the first time this house felt less like a place I occupied and more like a place someone argued with me inside. The absurdity of that nearly broke me. Of all the things to keep, not a photograph, not a love letter, but a thermostat note. You are impossible, I said. Often. I love you, I said, because the words had been waiting behind my irritation, like guests too polite to knock. His stillness changed. The entire room seemed to hold one breath. Si-yun. Do not make that face. I interrogated the feeling thoroughly. It passed inspection. His voice lowered. I love you. Economical. Exact. No flourish. I have loved you badly in several languages before learning this one. I laughed and it came out unsteady. That was almost poetic. Do not tell Junho. I am telling him immediately. Then omit badly. Never. He came closer, stopping an arm's length away. May I touch you? I answered by taking his hand. For a man whose public presence could quiet a ballroom, his fingers trembled once when they closed around mine. The kiss, when it came, was not cinematic. We were standing near a receipt bowl. Professor Moon was scratching the side of the sofa. My nose bumped his. He apologized against my mouth, which made me laugh, which made him smile, which made the second kiss less careful and more true. Tenderness did not erase the contract. It did not cleanse the beginning, but it gave us something beyond damage to work with. Our intimate life began later, slowly, with more conversation than either of us expected and more laughter than Tae-joon was prepared to survive. During my winter heat, I asked him to stay. We had planned because planning gave both of us dignity. Water, medicine, open windows if I needed air, no business calls, no assumptions. He treated desire not as permission but as weather we would navigate together. The night was warm, careful, and human. He asked, I answered. Sometimes the answer was yes, sometimes wait. Once laughably it was move your elbow. He listened to all of them. After, when fever loosened and dawn turned the curtains gray, he slept beside me with his hand open on the sheet. I placed my fingers in his palm. His hand closed gently before he woke. We did not announce love publicly. We simply stopped lying in private. The family learned in fragments. Chairman Kwon noticed first and seemed amused in the dark way. Old men are amused by storms they did not predict. Kwon Sang-moo tried one last maneuver, leaking details of my uncle's debt to a gossip site, framing me as a purchased Omega. Tae-joon asked what I wanted before acting. That mattered. I chose accuracy. Attorney Jang and Attorney Kim together issued a statement so dry it made the gossip post look childish, clarifying the debt as resolved through legal settlement and threatening action for harassment. Junho wanted to add, also the dumplings are excellent, but was overruled. Han Yura sent no message. I sent none back. Spring arrived. Harin graduated. My mother came to Seoul for the ceremony and met Tae-joon properly, which meant she looked him up and down, decided he was too thin, and fed him kimbap from a container in the university courtyard while his security team pretended not to watch. Does he eat? She asked me loudly. He follows schedules, I said. That is not eating. Tae-joon accepted another piece of kimbap. I am learning. My mother nodded, satisfied by effort if not results. Junho finally ended things with Mingyu after the chef missed the dumpling shop's anniversary dinner and sent a text with 3 apologies and no presents. Junho cried in my workroom, then made mandu for 6 hours and named the new flavor Dignified Exit. Taejun invested in the shop only after Junho wrote a business plan, cursed through 3 drafts, and accepted a no-control loan from a food cooperative Taejun had quietly connected him to. "Your husband is terrifying but administratively useful," Junho admitted. "High praise." "Do not tell him. He will become smug." "He is already smug internally." "Alphas." "Indeed." The 1-year contract ended on a rainy Thursday because Seoul enjoys narrative symmetry when inconvenient. Attorney Jang brought the final documents to the house. Workshop transferred, medical fund secure, family debt erased, compensation paid, divorce available upon request. Attorney Kim joined by video and confirmed every line. Taejun signed without hesitation. That was his last gift under the contract. The door remained open. After the lawyers left, we stood in the sitting room between our rooms, the same room that had become ours by argument, clutter, and habit. "You may leave," he said. "Legally, yes. Practically, too. Are you trying to be noble?" "I am trying not to be selfish." "You are failing at sounding unlike yourself." His mouth curved slightly. "Are you leaving?" I looked at the receipts bowl, the low cushion, the work lamp, Professor Moon asleep on a sweater that cost more than his moral character, and Taejun standing with all his cold control arranged around fear. "I went to that gala because I needed money and because I wanted to survive Han Yura's laughter," I said. "You made me your future husband without asking. That was arrogant." "Yes. Then you gave me choices, even when they cost you." "I tried. You learned to ask at doors. You learned to leave pairs without demanding gratitude. You learned that my boundaries do not insult your care. You kept a thermostat note like a ridiculous man." His eyes warmed. It was a good note. It was a complaint. It had personality. I stepped closer. "I am not staying because of the contract. I am not staying because you saved me from a joke. I am staying because this no longer feels like a house trying to hold me. It feels like a place I keep choosing to enter." The relief on his face was quiet, but it moved through him like winter loosening from a river. "Then stay," he said. "Ask properly." He lowered his head, not in defeat but in reverence for the difference between wanting and owning. "Park Si-yun, will you remain my husband by choice?" "Yes," I said, "but the thermostat stays at 22. 21.5. Do not negotiate during a proposal." Habit. "I will repair you eventually." "I believe you." He kissed me then, smiling against my mouth, and I thought of the ballroom where I had arrived as a joke, the public claim that began as a shield, the contract that made survival possible, and the slow work that came after. Not rescue, not possession, but restoration. Paper, when damaged, never returns to untouched condition. Anyone who promises that is either ignorant or selling something. Good repair does not hide every tear. It supports the weakened places so the whole can be handled again without pretending the wound never existed. That, I think, is what love became for us. Not the removal of history, but the courage to hold it carefully. Before evening, there was one more thing to settle. Junho arrived with a paper bag of dumplings, Harin behind him in her new nurse's coat, and my mother on a video call balanced against a teapot because she had learned technology only as far as it served interrogation. They stood in Taejun's severe kitchen and looked at us as if we were a committee hearing. Junho asked whether I had been coerced. Harin asked whether the house had proper smoke alarms. My mother asked whether Taejun had eaten lunch. Tae-joon answered all three with the same grave seriousness, which made Junho suspicious, Harin impressed, and my mother triumphant. Then Junho took my hand and looked at the ring still on it. For once, he did not joke. "You can still come home with me," he said. "The dumpling shop has terrible plumbing, but the couch is loyal." I squeezed his fingers. "I know." "You are choosing?" "I am choosing." His eyes reddened, and he immediately blamed steam from the dumplings. Harin hugged me so hard my ribs protested, then bowed awkwardly to Tae-joon and told him if he made me unhappy, she knew several nurses who could make injections hurt more than necessary. Tae-joon accepted this threat as if it were a family blessing. My mother watched from the teapot screen and said, "A house is not a home because it is expensive. It becomes one when people stop eating alone." No one knew what to do with that for a moment. Then Mrs. Seo, who had appeared without sound, set out bowls as if the matter had been decided by kitchen law. So we ate dumplings at the long table that had once looked designed for negotiations, sauce dishes crowding the polished wood, Professor Moon circling beneath like a tax collector, Tae-joon sitting beside me with his sleeve rolled because my mother had ordered him to relax. I remember that meal because it made the choice visible. It was not private romance hidden from reality. It was my people entering his rooms and leaving fingerprints. It was his staff laughing quietly at Junho's dramatic review of the soy vinegar. It was Harin stealing the red bean buns he had bought for her and pretending not to. It was Tae-joon reaching for the water pitcher before my mother's cough became a request, then looking at me as if to ask whether that was help or overreach. I nodded, and he poured. Small things again. Always the small things, building a life no contract could have described. That evening, I opened my workshop for a late class. Tae-joon drove me because he wanted to, and because I let him. The alley smelled of rain, ink, frying oil from Junho's shop 2 streets over, and old wood swelling in the damp. Professor Moon leapt from the car as if he owned both soul and the vehicle. Ma carried a box of archival tissue inside. Tae-joon stood by the door, reluctant to leave. "You have a meeting," I said. "Yes." "Will anyone be difficult?" "Likely." "Use grammar. It frightens rich men." "I learned from you." "No, I use punctuation." He touched the edge of my sleeve, not holding, just there. "I will come back at 9. "I'll be here." The words were ordinary. They were everything. He left, and I unlocked the door. My students arrived smelling of rain and office dust, carrying notebooks they wanted to make beautiful by force. I taught them how to hold brushes, how to let ink breathe, how not to fear the blank paper before touching it. At the end of class, after everyone left, I found a folded note under my mug. The paper was cheap receipt paper from the bowl at home. On it, in Tae-joon's spare handwriting, he had written, "Sources, you." I laughed alone in the quiet workshop, pressed the note between 2 clean sheets, and placed it in the drawer where I kept things too useful to call sentimental. Then I turned off the lights one by one and waited for the sound of his car returning through the rain.